Okay, welcome to another episode of Thoughts and Bolts. I'm your host, Pedro Laveria, and today we are talking about the feathered serpent, Kukulkan, aka Quetzalcoatl. My three main sources for this episode are going to be Prometheus and Atlas, the Popol Vuh, and Yucatan before and after the conquest by Friar Diego de Landa. This is a commentary on chapter 8 of Prometheus and Atlas. In chapter 8, Jorjani fleshes out Prometheus in Greek mythology and in modern literature, also making very interesting connections with Buddhism. But in this episode, I want to talk about the Mexican Prometheus, Kukulkan. And this is very, very interesting, and I hope you like it. Um, now, note of caution. The Popol Vuh is the monumental history, the mythic epic of the Quiche Maya. The Quiche live in highland Guatemala, and they called this god Q'uq'umatz, which means the quetzal-serpent. It's often translated as feathered certain serpent, but this is a selection from Christensen from the explanatory notes in his book. But the truly correct translation of this term, whether you're saying Quetzalcoatl in Nahuatl or in Kukulkan in Itza Mayan, is Quetzal serpent. And just to so you understand, the Mayans are still with us. There are still Mayan people in Mexico and Central America who speak Mayan languages. The Maya are what we might are like the Latins in Europe, right? So you have the Portuguese, and in Spain you have the Galicians, the Catalans, and the Castilians, right? Castilian being what we usually refer to as Spanish. But that's not the only language of Spain. There's also Valenciano, which some say is a dialect of Catalan, and some say it's an actual language. And there's also Asturiano, like the language of the Asturias. So, within Spain itself, there you have, like I said, Galician, Asturiano, you have Catalan, you have Castilian, and Valenciano. You have at least five languages, and that's not counting Euskara, which is not even related to the other languages. It's not Latin and it's not Indo-European. So you have at least six languages within Spain, but then in France you have French. You also have Catalan people in France. Um, but then you also have Italy, and there were multiple Italian languages. And you have Romania, right? So if we were just to be very simple and say the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, the Italians, and the Romanians, we could call them the Latins, right? Because they all speak languages that came from Latin, and they're all Christian, right? Um, but these aren't equivalent terms, right? You can't just switch the French for the Spanish or the Italians for the Romanians for the Portuguese willy-nilly and say, well, it's all the same thing because it's not, right? And the same thing goes for the Mayans, right? You have Yucatec, you have Mam, you have the Itza, you have the Quiche, and so these are all very different groups with their own languages, but they share, common root language and prehistory. And they also, especially in pre-Columbian times, they shared a basically same worldview and artistic canons. But again, even within the Mayan city states, there was variation between them, right? So, for example, like Yaxchilan, the stele there are very simple, right? Usually, when you start to learn how to translate Mayan glyphs, they tell you to start with Yaxchilan inscriptions, right? Because they're very simple, very simple stele. But Palenque, now you have something way more complicated, much longer text, right? And so, you start at Yaxchilan and you build yourself up little by little so that you can eventually start translating the stuff from Palenque, and the codices as well, so which are even more complicated, right? So especially the Dresden Codex, which is astronomical. But the point I'm trying to make is that, there is no such thing as the Mayans, right? There is such a thing as the Latins in Europe. You could talk about the Latins and you could talk about the Mayans, but if we're being more precise, we have to speak about individual polities. And the Popol Vuh is the epic mythic history of the Quiche Maya. So that's important. But in this episode, I may use Quetzalcoatl, Q'uq'umatz and Kukulkan interchangeably. Um, Quetzalcoatl is the Aztec or Nahuatl name for the same deity. The Aztecs are to the Quiche what the Portuguese are to the Finns. Okay, so Finland and Portugal are both part of Western civilization. The Finns and the Portuguese have more in common with each other than either does with the Chinese, let's say. However, Finnish isn't even an Indo-European language, and it's definitely not Latin language. And so, Finnish is related to Estonian, is related to Hungarian, it's part of the Finno-Uric family of languages. Um, and so, the Finns and the Portuguese have very different origins, correct? However, they converge in being part of Western Europe. And because of that, they belong to Western European civilization, which, according to Giorgio Maloney, is based on Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian values, right? And so that's why the Portuguese and the Finns today have more in common than they have different. However, they're still very different. And in the same way, the Aztecs, the Nahua were very different from the Quiche. So I'm just giving you the lay of the land vis-a-vis Mesoamerica as a civilizational sphere. So this god, like I said, he's the quetzal-serpent, and we're going to look at the quetzal bird later. He was a god of the sky, the land, and the underworld, right? He could fly and he could swim. And this again, to the whole theme of Prometheus and Atlas, is very spectral, is it not? Right? He doesn't belong to the sky exclusively like a bird, or the sea exclusively like a fish. He's a feathered serpent. He's a bird snake. And so again, he's kind of like an Archaeopteryx, is he not? Some kind of spectral being in the middle. He is the creator deity. Um, and I'm going to skip over a lot. I recommend reading the Popol Vuh for yourself right here. All this stuff comes from Christensen. Um, this is a selection from the Popol Vuh as he translated it. But essentially, Quetzalcoatl is a creator deity, right? He's one of the creator gods, perhaps the main creator god, you could say. Um, but he and the other gods created the first humans after several unsuccessful attempts using mud and then wood. And finally, they settled on corn and created the first humans from corn. And these humans were very grateful for their creation. And the Popol Vuh tells us that these humans were able to see unlimited distances. They could see as far as they wanted to see up into the heavens, and they could see through anything as well. So they could they're basically psychic, right? They could see as far as they wanted to see, and they could see through anything. And once they, in their gratitude, made this known to the gods felt very insecure and they did not like this. So the Council of the Gods convened, and the creator gods, including Snake Serpent, Quetzal Serpent, um, Kukulkan, decided to take away this vision from man. So they decided that man should not be able to see everything everywhere. And so they gave humanity our currently limited vision, right? Which is limited to the horizon or to what's in front of us. And so human beings lost this knowledge that they acquired from that vision. So what's interesting is that Quetzal serpent, he created human beings and made them rivals to the gods, right? The other creator gods did this as well. But once the creator gods felt threatened, they took away this vision. And this is important because he's part of this council that took away the vision, and you'll see why this is important later. Skipping over some stuff, eventually the human beings are wandering in this kind of dark and dreary world, and they learn of a city, a marvelous city called Tulan or Tolan. And again, this is from Christiansen. You can pause it right here. And they went in searching for it and found it. Now, Tolan, you could say, is the Mesoamerican Atlantis, right? It's this place where all the great, astronomy and calendrics and medicine and metalwork and everything was invented. Um, for the Quiche, this was a very real place. Christensen tells us that we don't really know where they thought it was. Tolan might have been for them Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztecs. It could have been Teotihuacan, that giant stone city in central Mexico, or it could have been Chichen Itza. We don't know. But they go to this city, and this is where they encounter the Quiche encountered their patron deity Tohil. So Tohil was a fire god. And again, you can pause this and read it for yourself. But eventually, the human beings they get their gods and they leave Tolan, and it's dark and it starts to rain. And all the peoples that were on this migration they lost the fire, and so the people were so sad. They're like, "What are we gonna do?" And Tohil has said to them, "Don't worry, Quiche, or the forefathers of the Quiche, right? Because the Quiche didn't exist yet. This is the story of their forefathers. I'll give you fire." And so Tohil, he uses a drill twist, right? He uses a drill twist to make fire. And he doesn't do this for all of humanity. He does this only for the forefathers of the Quiche. And it's through this fire and their possession of fire that they're then able to dominate and manipulate their neighbors. So this is a very important part that the gift of fire from Tohil is specifically to the Quiche. Because remember, the Popol Vuh is their story, right? They're the chosen people, right? Um, Now, remember how I told you earlier how Quetzal-serpent was part of the divine council, which agreed to take the the vision from humanity, the all-seeing eyes from humanity, right? What's interesting is that later on, skipping over a few chapters, we find out that Tohil is the god of the Yaqui, and they call him Yolquat Quetzalcoatl. Christensen tells us that Yolquat Quetzalcoatl literally means heart serpent, Quetzal serpent, heart serpent, feathered serpent. And the Yaqui, there is a tribe in northwestern Mexico called the Yaqui, and they are an Uto-Aztecan speaking people. But Christensen tells us that Yaqui is simply the Quiche word for Central Mexican Uto-Aztecan speaking peoples. Okay, so this is very similar to how the Amish refer to the rest of North America as English. So, it doesn't matter if you're an Italian from New York. According to the Amish, you're English. Why? Because you speak English and they speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Similarly, Yaqui is the key, even though there's an actual Uto-Aztecan tribe called the Yaqui. Yaqui is simply the Quiche term for Central Mexicans. And Quetzalcoatl, again, this is a Nahuatl word. Um, the Aztecs are actually cousins to the Hopi, cousins to the Comanche, to the Utes of Utah. They are the Uto-Aztecan speaking peoples. And so Quetzalcoatl in Popol Vuh is a loan word. It's a Central Mexican loan word. And so it's essentially what they're saying is that Tohil is really the Quetzal serpent. So that's how I'm reading this story. And I don't know if you can read it any other way, right? He's the creator God. He creates humanity along with the other gods. The other gods are freaked out when they see that the humans can see anything, anywhere, anytime. Um, and so he, along with the other gods, decides to limit the vision of humanity as the humans again are sauntering through this dark and dreary world. They go to Tulan, right, which is the heart of civilization, where the Quiche specifically encounter Tohil. He becomes their god. He joins them on their journey, and he gives them fire, just as Prometheus gave the fire to the first men. And what's interesting here is that Tohil just doesn't give them fire. He demonstrates how to make fire using the twist drill method, right? So he is literally the god of technique, of technology, of techne for the Quiche. And they then use this to lord over the other people who did not have fire. And so, like, he's a trickster god, just like Prometheus, just like Loki, right? Um, he acts in accordance with the divine council against the superpowered humans to make them normal humans, but then he goes behind their back, takes the form of a new god called Tohil, and gives the people the fire of technoscience, the technique as well for making fire. So he's this god of technoscience. Now, what's really interesting, if you go into Diego de Landa's book, he was a Spanish friar just right after the conquest of Mexico, and he tells us that the big temple in Chichen Itza was called Kukulkan. So the name of the temple was Kukulkan, which is again synonymous with Quetzalcoatl or Q'uq'umatz of the Quiche. And this is all happening in the Yucatan. And remember, the Quiche are from highland Guatemala, so this is quite a ways away. Um, but he tells us that for the Itza, Kukulkan was the actual historical figure. He came from the West and he laid the foundations for their political system, and then he left, right? And again, the name of the temple is Kukulkan. And I'm going to show you something really cool. Now, you may have seen this before. During the equinoxes, the sun hits the temple of Kukulkan at such an angle that it creates a body for the snake god whose head is at the bottom of the steps. Let's watch. There it is. There it is. There's Kukulkan. Do you see that? Do you see that? Look at that. The snake has a body. And this happens during the equinoxes. Okay? That is impressive. That is a visual effect. Okay? Now, keep that in mind. Remember, Kukulkan, Q'uq'umatz, Quetzalcoatl literally means the quetzal-serpent. So we have the serpent. Now, let's find the quetzal. This is the quetzal bird. Let's listen to his song. This is Kukulkan, the temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza. Let's learn about its acoustic sounds. Remember what the bird sounded like.
This is a simple echo. Actually, it's very simple to explain. When you clap in front of a pyramid, of a slope, the sound will go to the top. In this case, a pyramid. You know? And if it's there a cavity or a temple, like in this case, the echo will come back to you. If you clap in front of an Egyptian pyramid, nothing happens because the sound goes away. But here, the sound comes back. The sound comes back. The sound comes back.
As you can see, or as you can hear, it's the same sound. The exact same sound as the quetzal bird. So Kukulkan, being the quetzal snake, at his temple during the equinoxes, really does have a snake's body, and throughout the year makes the exact same sound as a quetzal bird, as he should. Now, why is this impressive? Two reasons. First of all, Prometheus literally means forethought. The people who built Chichen Itza had to know these two effects would work before they built the temple. Remember, this is a huge stone temple. There's no reset, there's no repeats, there's no do-overs. They had to know these two effects would work before they built the temple. They had to have the forethought, the theoretical forethought. Literally, they had to be Promethean to create the temple of the Mesoamerican Prometheus. Now, this is so interesting to me because remember, I've talked about Satan, I've talked about Set, and I've talked about Prometheus. But the Egyptians, the Hebrews, and the Greeks were all Mediterranean cultures. These people lived on the other side of the planet, and they had a converging or parallel mythos of a trickster deity who gave the techne, the fire of technoscience, to a beleaguered people. And this deity not only gave them technoscience, the way Prometheus did, but he is revealed through techne. He is revealed through craft. He is revealed through architecture. The architecture of his temple at Chichen Itza. Literally, right? So now we see, according to Delanda, why they called this temple Kukulkan. Again, during the equinoxes, the sun hits the temple in such an angle as to create a body for the snake's head at the bottom. The snake. And the acoustics of the temple are designed to create the sound of the quetzal bird. Quetzal. Quetzal bird. Quetzal-serpent. Quetzalcoatl. Kukulkan. Q'uq'umatz. Okay? So this is not just the God of technoscience, but this is the God who is revealed through technoscience, right? And so I think that's very, very cool. And it's something I don't think I would have been able to see had I not read chapter 8 of Prometheus and Atlas. Now, let's talk about chapter 8. Jorjani leverages Shelley to connect Prometheus with Atlantis, or Jorjani shows us how Shelley, in his book Prometheus Unbound, connects Prometheus with Atlantis, because you have this image in the book of these craft going into the water, right? And under the water in the ocean, there's a city, right? So this is a sunken city of Atlantis. And in Shelley's reading, Prometheus is the god of Atlantis. Now, what's interesting is Shelley's book is modern, right? It post dates Aeschylus and Prometheus Bound by, more than 1,000 years, more than 2,000 years, perhaps, or 2,000 years. But anyways, there is a modern telling of Kukulkan, which I think deserves to be added to the canon, just as Shelley's story should be added to the Promethean canon. And that is the Kukulkan of Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever. Okay. In the Marvel comic books, Namor is the Prince of Atlantis. He's the ruler of Prince Namor is the ruler of Atlantis. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, perhaps because DC already has an Atlantean, right? Uh, Aquaman. The Atlantis of the Namor comics becomes Talokan. And Namor retains his name, but also becomes Kukulkan, right? In the movie, we learn Namor comes from as a shortening of the Spanish "un niño sin amor," a child without love, because of his brutality. So "un niño sin amor, namor." And Namor is called by his people Kukulkan. And just like the Kukulkan of the Maya, he flies through the air and he goes down underwater into the underworld, underwater where Talokan is found. So he really is Kukulkan. He flies through the air and he goes underwater. And again, Talokan is Atlantis, right? It's a reworking of Atlantis from the original comic book Namor. Okay. And so again, this is just like Shelley. Shelley connects Prometheus to Atlantis, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe connects Kukulkan to Atlantis as well by reworking Atlantis into Talokan. And again, Prometheus is the Kukulkan of the Greeks, and Kukulkan is the Prometheus of the Maya. And we have them both in this superhero, Namor. And I also think it's cool that Tenoch Huerta played Namor. Tenoch is actually an Aztec name. It's the name of the leader of the Aztecs who was leading them through the desert during their time of wandering. And, was he had a vision where the God told him that, you're going to stop this exodus when you see an eagle eating a snake on top of a cactus. And when you see that, you're going to stop and you're going to build a city there. Well, it turns out they're walking and they see this big lake, and on top of the lake is this little island, and on top of the island is a little island. There's a cactus, and there's an eagle eating a snake on top of the cactus. So, oh my God, now they have to build a city on a lake, and that is how Tenochtitlan was born, the city of the Aztecs. Um, but yeah, so in Tenoch Huerta, the actor is from Mexico City, so I think it's kind of cool that they picked him to be Namor. But yeah, this is the main reason I watched that movie. you know, uh, it was a good movie. But I really wanted to see Namor because I loved that character as a kid in the comic books, and now to have him be a Mayan Namor, to be Kukulkan, was just so cool for me to watch. But again, you have this connection of Kukulkan with Atlantis, just as you have Shelley connecting Prometheus with Atlantis. And it's all very cool. I hope you liked this episode. I know I liked making it. Remember, consciousness is not classified. All praise be to Kukulkan. And look at the description of this video because I'll have some interesting links there vis-a-vis Mayan mathematics and Mayan astronomy that I think you'll find interesting. Until next time, I wish you all the best and good night.